People need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy, and I can't do that as Bruce Wayne. As a man, from flesh and blood, I can be ignored, I can be destroyed, but as a symbol, I can be incorruptible. I can be everlasting.
What symbol?
Something elemental, something terrifying.
Who are you?
My name is merely Ducard, but I speak for Ra's al Ghul, a man greatly feared by the criminal underworld. A man who can offer you a path. What are you seeking?
I seek the means to fight injustice, to turn fear against those who prey on the fearful.
On what path can Ra's al Ghul offer?
The path of a man who shares his hatred of evil and wishes to serve true justice.
Now you think, because your mommy and your daddy got shot, you know about the ugly side of life, but you don't. You've never tasted desperate. You're Bruce Wayne, the Prince of Gotham. You'd have to go 1,000 miles to meet someone who didn't know your name. So don't come down here with your anger, trying to prove something to yourself. This is a world you never understand, and you always fear what you don't understand.
You care about justice? Look beyond your own pain, Bruce. This city is rotting. They talk about the Depression as if it's history, and it's not. Things are worse than ever down here. Falcone floods our streets with crime and drugs, preying on the desperate, creating new Joe Chills every day. No, Falcone may not have killed your parents, Bruce. But he's destroying everything that they stood for.
Do you still feel responsible for your parents' death?
My anger outweighs my guilt.
Your parents' death was not your fault. It was your father's.
Gotham must be destroyed. The city has become a breeding ground for suffering and injustice. It is beyond saving and must be allowed to die.
I will go back to Gotham and I will fight, but I will not become an executioner.
Master Wayne, are you coming back to Gotham for long, sir?
As long as it takes. I'm going to show the people of Gotham their city doesn't belong to the criminals and the corrupt.
Nomex survival suit for advanced infantry. Kevlar bi-weave, reinforced joints.
Tear resistant.
This sucker will stop a knife.
Bulletproof.
Anything but a straight shot.
My bets, Master Wayne.
That's frightened me. This time my enemies shared my dread. What's that? Tunnel?
Oh, you wouldn't be interested in that.
Does it come in black?
He's here.
Who? The Batman.
If you devote yourself to an ideal, then you become something else entirely.
Which is?
Legend, the story.
June 15th, 2005, the Caped Crusader returned to the big screen in Batman Begins. The film detailed the origins of Bruce Wayne and his journey to becoming the Dark Knight. It was directed by British director Christopher Nolan, at the time known for Memento and Insomnia. The film was produced on a large budget of $150 million, and it grossed $374 million worldwide, which today seems a little unimpressive for a superhero flick, but despite less than stellar box office numbers, it was met with rave reviews from critics and fans, with many of them claiming it was the best Batman movie to date, and it was followed up by 2 sequels that made the series one of the most successful trilogies ever. After the failure of Batman and Robin in 1997, Warner Bros. Struggled with what direction to take the character. Joel Schumacher had planned to pursue with a 5th movie that would serve as a prequel called Batman Beyond, which would take a lot of influence and cues from Frank Miller's Batman Year One graphic novel. Joel felt the fans deserved a real Batman movie that went back to basics. Scripts were produced, but nothing was ever officially greenlit. But the idea of an origin story was definitely the direction everyone wanted to go. Come the early 2000s, Darren Aronofsky had shown an interest, and at this point Joel Schumacher had bowed out. The scripting process of the fifth movie went through many drafts. The Matrix directors, the Wachowskis, had a stab at it, but their work was rejected. Joss Whedon pitched his idea, but Warner Brothers didn't like it. Come early 2003, Christopher Nolan, who had produced Insomnia for Warner's and had an office at their studios, caught wind of the studio wanting to reboot Batman. Chris felt he had a great idea to kickstart Batman, and pitched them his idea of an origin story that was very much grounded in reality and wanted to explore areas of the Batman mythology that hadn't been addressed before on film. His ultimate goal was to get the audience to care for both Bruce Wayne and Batman. Warner Brothers were impressed, and he was hired. Christopher Nolan was a fan of Batman, but openly admitted he wasn't an expert on the character, so Chris signed on David Goyer, who had a vast knowledge of comic books and had screenwriting credits for Blade 2 and Blade Trinity. There wasn't a definitive account of Bruce Wayne's origins. The previous films hadn't addressed it. There were comics that dealt with different parts of Bruce's timeline, but not one single story that highlighted everything on his journey to becoming Batman, so they had to fill in the gaps of his past. Nolan took inspiration from the 1989 short story The Man Who Falls, which details Bruce's travels around the world and how he trains in martial arts, and his first encounter as a kid with the bats under Wayne Manor as he falls down a well. Other elements were inspired from The Long Halloween, with the inclusion of Carmine Falcone, and to help fill in the early years of Batman they took ideas from Batman Year One, which also detailed the development of Gordon's and Batman's working relationship, and how they dealt with the corruption of the police in Gotham. Christopher Nolan felt the previous Batman films relied too much on style over drama, and took a lot of inspiration from the 1978 blockbuster Superman the Movie, directed by Richard Donner. He wanted to emulate the casting, having these famous and well-respected actors give it that epic feel, and getting out of that studio-bound set, expanding the landscape to make it feel like a real world that Batman could exist in. Chris Nolan has a lot of respect for Dick Donner and Superman the Movie, and had a great discussion with him on the Dark Knight Trilogy box set, which is definitely worth checking out. Chris even reveals he paid the Fortress of Solitude set a visit as a child. They had to find an actor to portray Bruce Wayne and his alter ego Batman. Many actors had auditioned for the part: Ian Bailey, Henry Cavill, Jake Gyllenhaal, Heath Ledger and Cillian Murphy, who was turned down for the role of Batman, but Nolan was very impressed with his performance. He wasn't right for Batman, but persuaded the studio to cast him as Scarecrow. All the actors who auditioned wore the Val Kilmer Batman Forever suit. Christian Bale, who was interested in playing the part back when Darren Aronofsky was involved, auditioned, but beforehand he had to really bulk up. He was very thin due to his role on The Machinist, that dealt with a man who was losing his mind due to lack of sleep. So Christian had to really pump on the fat and muscle quickly before the screen test. Bale had studied the graphic novels and how Batman posed in the illustrations, and when it came time for his audition, he had already worked out his Batman voice.
He knows who was at the docks.
He won't talk.
He'll talk to me.
Director Christopher Nolan said Bale had exactly the right balance of darkness and light that he was looking for. Christian went well over the weight required for the role, however, and the crew was starting to get concerned that he was getting too big, and Bale in the making of pointed out they started calling him Fat Man.
A number of the crew I'd worked with on previous movies, they looked at me and they were like, bloody hell, Chris, what are we doing here, Fat Man or Batman?
So he had to lose the excessive weight by the time filming began, so he was more agile and leaner to look more in line with Batman. They made great changes to the Batman suit and how it worked. In the past, the suits for the most part looked great on film, but were very restrictive for the actor, hence why most of the time the stuntman would take over, who would take on the stress of dealing with the outfit. If Batman wasn't talking to camera, then the stuntman would fill in. The new costume had to allow Batman to crouch down or jump on ledges easily, without any difficulty, and be able to turn his head. Costume designer Lindy Hemming and her crew worked on the new costume. The Batsuit's undersuit was basically a wetsuit, which had moulded latex sections applied over it, which gave him his body armour. With the increased level of comfort, the actor would still get pretty hot in the suit, due to the foam latex of the cowl, but Bale stayed in the suit for hours, often for the whole day of shooting. Christopher Nolan wanted a cloak that blows and flowed like in the comics. The costume design team created the cape out of their own version of parachute nylon, with a very fine hair-like material applied to it. With electrostatic flocking used, they ran a charge under the fabric. This process gave the cape a seamless look and a distinctive velvety sheen. The cowl was created to be thin enough to allow motion, but thick enough to avoid wrinkling when Bale turned his head. There was still a limit to how far he could turn the cowl, but he didn't have to do the old Batman turn to look left or right. The Batmobile wasn't originally going to be featured in the film in the early stages, but at the request of Warner Brothers they wanted it to be in the movie. The Batmobile came with a new name, the Tumbler, which in the movie is designed by Wayne Tech. It's a tank-like vehicle used by the military that can be used for bridging, and the ability to boost into a jump without the need of a ramp. The prop makers at Shepperton Studios developed the car. 6 vehicles were built. One was a radio-controlled model to be used for the elaborate effect sequences as it jumps over buildings. 2 full-size driving versions were used in exterior shots, while another full-size model with hydraulic enhancements was used in jumping sequences. A further full-size version carried propane tanks to fuel the rocket blast out of the rear nozzle. The interior shots were in an immobile studio set, and not actually the interior of the car. The cockpit was oversized to fit cameras for scenes filmed inside it. Christopher Nolan made great efforts to surround Christian Bale with a fantastic cast. We got the legendary Michael Caine playing Alfred Pennyworth. Michael Caine created his own backstory to Alfred. He served in the Special Air Service before becoming a butler, so it gives a little more to the character, so if he was in trouble he could look after himself thanks to his military experience. Gary Oldman plays James Gordon, one of the few uncorrupted Gotham City police officers. Oldman was Nolan's first choice as Ra's al Ghul, but when Chris Cooper turned down the part of Gordon, Nolan decided that it would be refreshing for Oldman, who is often cast to be a villain, to play a good guy. Liam Neeson plays Henry Deckard, aka the real Ra's al Ghul, who tricks Bruce into thinking he is just another member of the League of Shadows. The League is an ancient society that uses chaos to punish the corrupt and decadent. He introduces himself to Bruce as an associate of Raj's, and trains Bruce in martial arts and becomes a mentor to him. Morgan Freeman plays Lucius Fox, a high-ranking Wayne Enterprises employee demoted to working in the company's Applied Science division. When Bruce returns from training around the world, Fox supplies him with much of the gear necessary to carry out his missions as Batman. Fox at first is a little bemused why he wants this gear. Bruce tells him he needs the equipment for spelunking. Ken Montague plays Ra's al Ghul's decoy. He is a member of the League of Shadows assigned to impersonate Ra's al Ghul during Bruce's training. Cillian Murphy plays Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow. Jonathan is the chief administrator of Arkham Asylum. He is a specialist in the psychology of fear. He has been using fear-inducing toxin on his victims and plots with Ra's al Ghul to expose the entire Gotham population to it. Murphy did his research on the character and wanted to make the Scarecrow less theatrical. The overall design for the character was greatly changed to move away from the traditional Scarecrow design and to avoid any comparisons to Wurzel Gummidge. Katie Holmes plays Rachel Dawes, Bruce's childhood friend, who serves as Gotham City's assistant district attorney, fighting against corruption in the city. She works with the DA, Finch, who is played by Larry Holden, who sadly passed away in 2011 due to cancer. Finch was originally going to be Harvey Dent, but Nolan wasn't planning a sequel, so he felt it was best to leave the character out. Tom Wilkinson plays Carmine Falcone, the most powerful mafia boss in Gotham, and goes into business with Jonathan Crane and Ra's al Ghul by smuggling Crane's fear toxins through his drug shipments over the course of several months so that they can be mixed in with the city's water supply. And finally we have Rutger Hauer playing William Earl, the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, who took over the business when Thomas Wayne was murdered, and tells Bruce he'll keep the company in safe hands. But during Bruce's absence, he takes the company public as he attempts to push control away from Bruce. The film is littered with cameos, with Gerard Murphy as Judge Faden, Richard Brake as Joe Chill, who murders Bruce's parents, and Shane Rimmer plays the waterboard technician. Shane also popped up in Superman 2 and 3. Christopher Nolan used Blade Runner as a source of inspiration for Batman Begins. He felt the 1982 sci-fi classic had a credible universe that didn't appear to have any boundaries, which he applied to Batman with the help of cameraman Wally Vista and production designer Nathan Crowley. To create the look of Gotham City, Crowley and Nolan designed it as a large modern metropolitan area that would reflect the various periods of architecture that the city had gone through. Elements were drawn from New York City, Chicago and Tokyo, with the inclusion of elevated freeways and monorails. For shooting locations, Chicago doubled for Gotham City, but the majority of the film was shot in England, very much like Superman the movie. The Narrows of Gotham were all a set that was built in a large airship hangar that's only about 40 minutes from where I live. Parts of London St Pancras train station was used for the interior of Arkham. For Wayne Manor, Mentmore Towers was used for the interiors and exteriors. London University was used for Gotham State Courts, and Shepperton Studios was used for the Batcave and additional scenes. At the end of the movie, you can clearly see it was filmed in the UK. When Wayne Manor has burnt down and Bruce is cleaning up the rubble, you can see that English countryside in the background, very flat and no sign of Gotham. The movie doesn't go the familiar route with an origin story. It cuts back and forth to Bruce's childhood and his older years before Batman. The movie opens with the early days of Bruce Wayne as he first encounters the bats beneath Wayne Manor that haunt him for the rest of his life. While watching an opera with his parents, Thomas and Martha, Bruce becomes frightened by the performers masquerading as bats and wants to leave. As they leave the theatre, a mugger by the name of Joe Chill murders Bruce's parents in front of him. Orphaned, Bruce is raised by the family butler, Alfred. Bruce feels he is to blame for the death of his parents and shoulders the guilt for years. 14 years later, Bruce still wants revenge on Chill and plans to shoot him. Chill is freed in exchange for testifying against Gotham City Mafia boss Carmine Falcone. One of Falcone's assassins shoots Chill before Bruce can. Bruce's childhood friend Rachel Dawes berates him for attempting to undermine the justice system, saying that his father would be ashamed, and tells him Gotham is worse than ever and attempting to kill Chill is not going to solve anything. Bruce confronts Falcone. He tells him that real power comes from being feared. Bruce has a change of heart and decides to travel the world and learns how to confront injustice. While in Asia, he is put in prison for being involved with the wrong people. He is approached by Henry Ducard, who offers him a chance to fight injustice and a path to becoming something more than just a man. Bruce is freed from prison and travels to the home of the League of Shadows, led by Ra's al Ghul. After years of training and purging his fears, he is now a full member of the League of Shadows, and his first mission is to destroy Gotham, as they believe the corruption that has taken over the city is beyond saving. To complete his training, he has to kill a local criminal as punishment for his crimes. Bruce refuses and doesn't want to kill. He has chosen a different path and wants his enemies to face justice, not by death. Bruce escapes and sets fire to the temple, and in the process Raj is killed by falling debris. Bruce decides to save Ducard and returns back to Gotham, where he has been gone for 7 years. Bruce tells Alfred that he intends to fight the crime in Gotham and needs to create a symbol to strike fear into his enemies. He surprises the board of Wayne Enterprises with his return, especially the corrupt William Earl. Bruce pays a visit to Lucius Fox, who allows Bruce access to prototype defense tech, including a protective bodysuit and a heavily armoured car called the Tumbler. He then sets up base in the caves beneath Wayne Manor and starts to work on his new suit. He confronts Commissioner Gordon, who he met as a child when his parents were murdered. He knows Gordon is an honest cop and offers his help. Bruce catches word that there is a drug smuggling deal going on at the Gotham docks. He surprises Falcone's gang and takes them out quickly one by one, and grabs hold of Falcone and declares to him that he is Batman. Christopher Nolan wanted to avoid using CGI as much as possible with the execution of the special and visual effects. He tried to shoot what he could within camera to achieve the shots, and CGI would be applied to the shots if needed to expand and complete a sequence. For example, Gotham City, they cleared the streets and got a clean plate of downtown Chicago and added CG elements over the top. For the long shot of Gotham, it was a CG template with thousands of real photographs applied over the CG wire model. There were also elements of CGI used, for example the bats that surround Bruce in the Batcave and when they come to help him escape from Arkham. Also when Crane uses his fear toxin. The hallucinations were all CGI, which is pretty obvious. But with the limited use of CG, it still looks great today. You'd be surprised how many miniatures were used in the film. The League of Shadows temple was a model. When you see it explode, the Narrows as it's seen from a distance, the Tumbler as it flies over the building tops, The monorail was in miniature form as you see it come off the tracks and collide with the lower structure of Wayne Enterprises and explodes. With the large amount of miniatures, in-camera stunt work and limited use of CG, it made the film stand the test of time and will continue to do so for years to come. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard composed the score to Batman Begins. Nolan had originally asked Hans to compose the music, but Hans suggested James should collaborate with him. Zimmer and Howard split the responsibility of handling the themes for the split personality of Bruce Wayne and Batman. Howard would handle the dramatic moments and Zimmer the action scenes. They drew inspiration for the music by visiting the set in London and stayed there for nearly 12 weeks to complete most of their writing. Zimmer wanted to avoid using the themes from the previous Batman films, which Christopher Nolan also wanted. This movie would be a fresh start, and creating a new sound was key. The new score to Batman Begins would be a mix of an orchestra and electronic music, which was a popular choice for Hans Zimmer. The score's direction and sound mostly lean towards Zimmer's style of composing, and roughly 70% of the score is Zimmer's and the rest is Howard's. The best parts of the score for me is seeing Gotham in its heyday. It has a very rich sound to it with a great sense of hope and prosperity. When Bruce turns on the League of Shadows and attempts to escape the temple, it has some terrific action cues that get your heart pumping, and the attack on the Narrows in Gotham at the end works wonders. When I first saw the film, however, I was initially disappointed with the score. It lacked the character and the rich melodies of Danny Elfman's work, but it started to grow on me the more I listened to it. There is a theme for Batman in the film, but it's not something you can hum along to. It's just repetitive beats and drums, and sometimes very minimalistic. That works wonderfully for the action scenes, but as a big main theme, it doesn't compete with Elfman's work. The problem that I've seen in the last decade with film music is that many films, and especially superhero movies, tend to copy this style of music. It's like the studios temp track their movies with Hans Zimmer's work, and the composers they bring on are creatively cornered to copy the same style. So you end up with music lacking any real character. You can easily take the music from Batman Begins and slap it on another film and it will work just as well. So you end up with this wallpaper sound that can be plastered onto any movie. I would hold this score in higher regard if this style was contained to this film, but because it brought on this very generic sound for many blockbuster movies, I can't bring myself to say it's a great score. It does work for the film and there are tracks I enjoy listening to, but it's a shame Zimmer and Howard didn't bring more to the table to give Nolan's Batman universe a bit more character with its music. If you don't own the soundtrack and are interested in picking it up, you can easily get it on CD or download it through iTunes. 2005, Electronic Arts released a video game based on the movie. It was released on the Xbox, PS2, GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. The now defunct developer Eurocom produced the console ports, and Vicarious Visions, who are still in business, handled the GBA version. The console versions followed the movie closely but made a few alterations here and there to the story. It uses clips from the film and even the actors lend their voices, apart from Gary Oldman. Christian Bale and Cillian Murphy, who are big fans of video games, were more than happy to be involved. The designers at Eurocom did a fantastic job recreating the look of the film, and the game has a very competent graphical engine. As Batman, you get to frighten your enemies before you attack them. Using fear is one of your best tools, and you can interrogate the bad guys for information. You can use all your gadgets to get around the levels and climb around the locations. The game employs driving segments in the tumbler, which feels like it's been lifted from the game Burnout. It's clear that Rocksteady borrowed a number of elements from this game, and refined them for their highly successful and far superior Batman Arkham series. The reviews for the game at the time were given above average reviews. It was far better than some of the other efforts out at the time, based on the character, such as Batman Dark Tomorrow, which was an unplayable buggy mess. The game is playable and harmless fun, but surprisingly short, and the game holds your hand a lot throughout, taking away any serious challenge. You can complete it in under 4 hours. It's very cheap and easy to get hold of secondhand, so if you fancy a trip down memory lane, I think it's worth a playthrough. The Game Boy Advance version was a radically different game, down to the hardware. The programmers went with the platform approach. It sticks close to the plot of the movie like the console ports, but was a very mediocre game that didn't leave many gamers impressed at the time. It was very much just a run-of-the-mill game. It was nicely animated, however, but very uninteresting to look at. I think they should have applied a comic book look to it, instead of trying to push the realistic approach with its graphics to make it look more appealing. This game also is pretty short, and sadly you don't get to use the tumbler. It would have been cool to have a similar driving segment like in Batman Returns for the Mega CD. Despite Batman Begins not lighting up the box office, the DVD sales and strong reviews kept Warner Bros. Interested in following up with the sequel, titled The Dark Knight. It's interesting that the following year in 2006, Superman Returns made more money than Batman, but was considered a bit of a flop in Warner Bros. Eyes. But what didn't help Superman was its huge budget, and not enough money was made in return for them to follow it up with a sequel. And in 2013 Superman was rebooted. 3 years later, in 2008, The Dark Knight arrived and had Batman face up against the Joker and Two-Face. The film was a massive hit, making just over $1 billion at the box office, making it the most successful comic book movie ever made. Also, many felt it was one of the best sequels ever produced. The film went further with its serious tone, becoming less of a comic book movie and more of a crime thriller, feeling like it was a Batman movie directed by Michael Mann. Heath Ledger blew everyone away with his incredible performance as the Joker, but he sadly passed away before the film came out. It was a career-defining moment for him, and unfortunately he couldn't enjoy the success of that and was taken from us too soon. Nolan, being a huge fan of celluloid, shot large majorities of the film in the IMAX format, further encouraging moviegoers to seek out the biggest screens possible to take advantage of the large format scenes. In July 2012, The Dark Knight Rises arrived and had a huge amount of hype attached to it due to the success of The Dark Knight. Set 8 years after the death of Two-Face, Bruce Wayne is no longer Batman and is suffering from depression after the loss of Rachel and has gone into hiding. The death of Harvey Dent has had an effect on Gotham, and crime and corruption has started to rise. The popular comic book villain Bane, played by Tom Hardy, takes over Gotham with the help of the League of Shadows, who have returned to seek revenge. Batman comes out of retirement and is defeated by Bane and gets his back broken. He is taken far away from Gotham and shoved into a prison and is forced to watch the city fall apart. Bruce has to get himself back in shape to save the day. Fans complain that Batman was barely in it, possibly totaling just 23 minutes of screen time in a 2.5-hour plus movie. It introduced Catwoman, played by Anne Hathaway, the new Batwing, and a new character called Blake, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who after a little investigating discovers that Bruce is Batman. The reviews were strong, but many fans were disappointed, and over the time it has received more complaints on its script and its failure to meet expectations. It wasn't the sequel many were hoping for. I will discuss these movies in more detail in future. Batman Begins came out when I think the public weren't necessarily desperate for another film featuring the Caped Crusader. I think the bad taste of Batman and Robin was still present. Fans didn't want another movie that was just designed for a quick cash grab and to sell merchandise such as lunchboxes and toys. Christopher Nolan wasn't a big name director and very much untested in this type of film. The casting was certainly risky, even the early teaser trailers tried to avoid showing too much of Batman. But thankfully any fears the fans and the general public had were put to rest when they finally saw it. They were given a complex and interesting story and characters they cared about. The beauty of Batman Begins and why I love it is that it has Bruce Wayne at the centre of the story. As Batman, he is not hiding in the shadows or feeling like a secondary character in his own movie. You see his journey from losing his parents and his frustration with how his life has turned out, and feeling lost and how he eventually becomes the Dark Knight. You get to spend time with him and see how he thinks and plans his journey to fight crime. It was so refreshing at the time. For years in the comics and the previous films, it always glossed over everything that dealt with his past. You had to fill in the blanks yourself to fit it all together, but you were still not given enough information about him. The animated movie Mask of the Phantasm did a wonderful job showing you the years before he officially became Batman, but still that was light on its feet for detailing Bruce Wayne's backstory and just chose a specific point in his life. But Batman Begins confidently accounts for everything that's needed to be addressed to get the audience behind why he wants to fight crime. With the successful narrative of Bruce Wayne, Nolan and Goyer didn't forget about the other important characters in Bruce's life, such as Commissioner Gordon and Alfred. Finally, after years, there was a great working relationship between Batman and Gordon. The previous movies gave Gordon really nothing to do. He was totally wasted. We finally have Gordon at a younger age trying to do the best he can in a corrupt city, and is the only one to have faith in Batman, but doesn't fully accept what Batman is doing, but understands it's for the greater good. Gary Oldman totally embodies everything that I wanted to see in a live-action version of Gordon. It was some of the finest casting in the movie. You can't go wrong with Gary Oldman. He's one of the best actors in the business. Liam Neeson is a fantastic villain. Going with Ra's al Ghul was a great choice to kickstart Batman again, instead of just throwing in a classic villain such as the Joker or the Riddler. With Bruce discovering Deckard was really Ra's al Ghul, you have this wonderful scene where he reveals his plans for Gotham and what Bruce could have been. Raj tells Bruce that he was his greatest student and he should be saving the world by his side. He is essentially another father figure to Bruce, but Bruce ultimately rejects him. The film has a strong theme of Bruce searching for a father. Thomas Wayne died when Bruce was too young. He meets Deckard, who encapsulates everything Bruce as an adult would want in a father, and Bruce clearly has a lot of respect for him, but sadly they don't share the same ideologies. They both want the same goal, but want to achieve it in radically different ways. Bruce will not kill as Batman, which was very much enforced in this film, and becomes a strong theme throughout the trilogy, and this makes him a hero. In the early days of Batman in the comics, he killed his victims, but that was quickly changed after a couple of years, and Batman for the most part in the comics chose not to kill his enemies. With Raj, he is a villain, but not in a classical sense. His old ways and beliefs make him a bad guy in a modern society. Alfred, despite not being related, is the real father of Bruce. He raised him and continued to support him through the years, even though he disagrees with what Bruce is doing. It's unconditional love. Michael Caine plays Alfred with so much affection, it's hard to see anyone else play him in this particular way. It was a slightly different Alfred from what we've seen before, but a far more complex and interesting interpretation. Now, this film is not entirely perfect. It has a couple of things that do bother me. I think many fans of the character Scarecrow felt very shortchanged by his lack of screen time, and with him not having much to do in terms of facing up against Batman. Once the Narrows fall into chaos, Scarecrow is taken out by Rachel very quickly. Some fans probably thought, well, they may explore his character in the sequels, but sadly not. He just became a cameo and his threat on Batman had totally dissolved. When they announced Scarecrow as the villain, I thought to myself, great, but as you watch the film you realise they don't really know what to do with him, apart from the small role he played on the downfall of the Narrows, and the focus shifts to Ra's al Ghul. It's a shame really, because I think even with the sequels they could have had Scarecrow create a more potent version of the toxin and have it really mess with Batman, very much like your first encounter with him in the first Batman Arkham game. Also, Cillian Murphy wasn't particularly memorable as the Scarecrow. I also think he was probably a bit too good looking to play Jonathan Crane. You have to remember he did audition to play Batman. Crane in the comics always seemed like a socially awkward person that seemed frail and someone that didn't fit in. Jonathan Crane only used his mask a couple of times, and you have to be under the influence of the drug to see what he can do, and there wasn't enough time granted for him to do that. Fear is also a major theme in the film, which supports the story of Bruce Wayne becoming a hero. Director Christopher Nolan stated that the idea behind the film was a person who would confront his innermost fear and then attempt to become it. Bruce rises above it and uses it as a weapon. They explore fear as a major threat in the movie, and it's further embodied by the Scarecrow. The allusions to fear are seen throughout, from Bruce conquering his own demons, to becoming Batman and the deadly toxin used by Scarecrow and the League of Shadows. With those visual representations of the fear, I'm surprised the movie got a 12A on release in the UK. When Batman sprays Crane with the toxin and you see the Batman that Bruce Wayne would ultimately want to be to scare his victims, it's really creepy. I think that was probably too extreme for younger viewers. I think if they went with a 15 rating and just increased the violence or tone to reflect that rating, then maybe they could have been less restrained in other areas. The final act, for example, could have been far more terrifying when the fear toxin engulfs the Narrows. With the movie's design and serious tone, I don't think it would ultimately appeal to children. When you saw all the toys and merchandise for it, it seemed a bit pointless. It didn't feel connected, which is kind of strange because the previous movies relied heavily on that, and I brought all the toys as a kid. Another issue was the editing. When it came time to the fight scenes, especially for the third act, it's far too choppy. Nolan shoots a lot of the fight scenes in close-ups, and with Batman and his enemies all wearing very dark outfits, it becomes difficult to see what's going on. When Batman makes his first appearance, the quick edits are very much needed to create this mystery of who it is and how quick he moves. But if it was me editing the film, I would have slowed the edits down for the battles in the later half of the movie. They used a new martial arts style for the film called Casey, which employs movements to protect your head and body with your arms, in case you are attacked by multiple people. Instead of spending time on a lot of techniques, the Casey style teaches you how to react correctly, yet instinctively, and uses parts of your body, elbows, hammer fists, the cranium, that are durable both offensively and defensively. This style is very unique and cool to see in action, but you don't get to see it at its best in the movie. In the sequel, Nolan clearly paid attention to the edits and slowed it down so you got to see it in full. The relationship between Bruce and Rachel never really worked for me, and how they long for each other. It's made clear at the end that Bruce's alter ego is stopping them from being together, and this is addressed further in the sequel, but even by that point I don't fully believe they are in love. By Dark Knight, the character of Rachel has changed a lot. I don't think Maggie Gyllenhaal took on what Katie did with her performance. It feels like a different character. In Batman Begins, it seems Bruce is more interested in her. He wants something he can never have because of the path he has chosen, which is the director and writer's intent, but there just isn't that chemistry on film, and the writing doesn't reflect on what Nolan is trying to achieve with this relationship. There isn't enough time spent with Rachel and Bruce for me to buy into their love and what they want down the line. Now, a lot has been said over the last number of years about Christian Bale's Batman voice. I think he really needed to dial it back because it just became over the top. When you have these really dramatic moments, Bale's voice just cuts a knife through the tension. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. In Batman Begins, it's not that bad, and there was a great moment when he's with Rachel in the Batcave and he's doing his Batman voice, but very subtle. There should have been more of that when he turned up as Batman. I think with all the interpretations of Batman we've had over the years on film, there is always one or two little things that stop that actor being the best representation of the character. Michael Keaton, you got the great Batman suit, but he can barely move in it. He has a wonderful voice as the Dark Knight, but I didn't really care for his Bruce Wayne. It's really the writing's fault and not his in that regard. Val Kilmer looks amazing in the cowl, but I was never fully invested in his performance. Clooney seemed to put no effort into his Batman persona, and there were only a few good scenes with him as Bruce Wayne. With Christian Bale, you have someone who is in fantastic shape and can probably kick your ass without wearing the suit. His Bruce Wayne is spot on thanks to the brilliant dialogue. You are totally invested in his portrayal. He can do the moody, the classic playboy Bruce Wayne, and balance the emotions of his dark side and also wanting a normal life with Rachel. But sadly, you've got the silly, over-the-top, growly voice for his Batman. If that one ingredient was nailed on the head, I think he would be the ultimate version. Christian Bale has some regrets about his performance, which he has been open about since the Dark Knight trilogy had finished, and feels he could have done more with it, but sadly he won't get to wear the cowl again. Now we have Ben Affleck as Batman, portraying an older Bruce Wayne in Batman v Superman. Ben very much looks and acts the part, but for me is let down by clumsy writing and written to be a very mean Batman, killing people off left, right and centre. I'm going to wait till I see him in a standalone movie to judge him fully. Despite the little nitpicks I have with it, it's my personal favourite Batman film. The Dark Knight is a splendid movie, but I find myself going back to Batman Begins more, I suppose because it's less busy and Batman is the focus of the story and we get to see him doing what he does best. Even though it's the early days of him fighting crime, there is plenty in there to satisfy any cravings to see Batman in action. The quality of filmmaking in Batman Begins is extremely high. Christopher Nolan had a clear vision. The movie didn't feel like it was designed by a committee. It showed he had incredible talent as a director and is now one of the most powerful directors in the business. Warner Brothers pretty much gives him free rein to do what he wants. Wally Vista brings a unique look to Batman that hadn't been used in a mainstream comic book movie. It very much looks like an art house flick that leans far away from the gothic backdrop that Batman was always associated with. The photographic look is similar to, say, Fight Club. It has that late 90s David Fincher look. The movie competently stands on its own. It has a great start, middle and an end. It doesn't fall into the trappings of being another superhero film that is intent on setting up a sequel. There are hints there that the story is set to continue, but it doesn't seem desperate to set up a trilogy. They went with the goal of putting all their eggs into one basket to produce the best standalone Batman movie, and they pulled it off. It can perfectly exist on its own. I think Christopher Nolan set out to make the best origin story for Batman he could. He treats it seriously like Superman the movie, maintaining a sense of verisimilitude, making what you see on screen as believable as possible. It has a great sense of fun throughout. There is great little comedic moments, especially between Bruce and Alfred. It balances everything to make a solid, entertaining movie. You care for the characters, all the actors involved do a fine job, especially with Michael Caine, Christian Bale, Gary Oldman, Morgan Freeman and Liam Neeson. You are fully invested in Bruce Wayne and his alter ego Batman, which is what is most important. You've paid to watch a Batman movie and that's what you are given, and it's bloody brilliant.
When you told me your grand plan for saving Gotham, the only thing that stopped me from calling the men in white coats was when you said that it wasn't about thrill-seeking.
It's not.
What would you call that?
Damn good television.
Coming right up on his butt.
It's a miracle no one was killed.
I didn't have time to observe the rules of the road, Alfred.
You're getting lost inside this monster of yours.
I'm using this monster to help other people just like my father did.
For Thomas Wayne, helping others wasn't about proving anything to anyone, including himself.
It's Rachel, Alfred. She was dying.
Where are we? Why did you bring me here?
If I hadn't, your mind would now be lost. You were poisoned.
Who's Dr. Crane?
Rest. Gordon has Crane.
Sergeant Gordon, your friend.
I don't have the luxury of friends. You're not Ra's al Ghul. Watched him die.
But is Ra's al Ghul immortal? Are his methods supernatural? Crime, despair. This is not how man was supposed to live. The League of Shadows has been a check against human corruption for thousands of years. We sacked Rome, loaded trade ships with plague rats, burned London to the ground. Every time a civilization reaches the pinnacle of its decadence, we return to restore the balance.
Time to play. Gotham isn't beyond saving. Give me more time.
Time to spread the word. And the word is panic. When I found you in that jail, you were lost. But I believed in you. I took away your fear, and I showed you a path. You were my greatest student. It should be you standing by my side, saving the world.
I'll be standing where I belong. Between you and the people of Gotham.
No one can save Gotham.
The pressure's moving along the mains, blowing all the pipes. And if that pressure reaches us, the water supply right across the whole city is gonna blow!
What is necessary. I won't kill you. But I don't have to save you.
I never said thank you.
And you'll never have to.
If you enjoyed the video, you can find more on my YouTube channel, and also you can follow me on Twitter. If you want to help support the channel, you can donate through Patreon and receive monthly perks such as updates on the latest news on my channel, early access to reviews and commentaries before they go live on YouTube. Even the smallest donation can help keep this channel going. Thank you.